and I have to raise a few procedural housekeeping issues before we start. The meeting is being held under the virtual meetings regulations, which means that any decision made by the meeting will have the same standing and validity as if they had been made at a physical meeting held at the town hall. Today's meeting is streamed live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. I would refer you to the meeting etiquette and guide to using Teams as previously circulated. Please remember to use your headphones, as this will improve the sound quality for everyone. Please ensure that your audio is muted when you are not speaking and that your camera is turned off. When you wish to speak, please indicate by using the chat function rather than hand signals, as it's easier to monitor requests. You will be invited to speak by way of a queue system. If you are leaving or returning to the meeting, please ensure that I am aware of this by using the chat function. This is paramount in respect of any disclosable pecuniary interests, where you are not permitted to participate in the agenda by law. If you declare an interest, you should immediately leave the meeting before the start of any debate. And the Democratic Services Officer will confirm when you have left and when you rejoin. Voting. When proposing or seconding a motion, please indicate via the chat function that you wish to speak and wait until invited to do so. Please clearly state what you are moving. Voting on procedural matters will be done in reverse order and in block. That is, I will ask for votes against a motion first, then abstentions. All other members in the meeting will then be taken en bloc as voting for the motion. It is at my discretion if I call for a roll of names to be taken by the solicitor. Please state clearly if that is done, if your vote is for or against the motion or abstain. If you have not heard the full debate on the item, please state so and your vote will be marked abstain. Before I move to the agenda, are there any questions on what I've said from councillors? Right. I assume that all members can hear and see today's proceedings. Please ensure that all mobiles are switched to silence. For the benefit of those in the meeting and members of the press and public who may be watching, the solicitor will now undertake a roll call of all councillors to confirm attendance. I will then move on to the formal agenda. Mr. Brain.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, all I'm asking is if you can indicate that you are present if you have joined the meeting already. Councillor Applin. Councillor Ashton.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Bird.
Present.
Councillor Bridger.
Present.
Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Butte.
Present.
Councillor Caniford.
Present.
Councillor Cartman.
Present.
Councillor Cato.
Present.
Councillor Charles.
Present.
Councillor Cherry.
Present.
Councillor Clayton.
Councillor Clayton has requested that I say he may be a little late because he is finishing work.
Thank you. I knew he had work commitments. Councillor Codling.
Present.
Councillor Cole.
Present.
Councillor Crew.
Present.
Councillor Crockford-Hawley.
Present.
Councillor Cronolly.
Present.
Councillor Crosby. Councillor Davies.
Present.
Councillor Gibbons.
Present.
Councillor Gregor has given me his apologies. Councillor Griggs.
Present.
Councillor Harley. Councillor Haverson. Councillor Hearn.
Present.
Councillor Hitchins. Councillor Hogg.
Present.
Councillor Holland.
Present.
Councillor Jacobs.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Keating.
Present.
I'm aware that Councillor Lee Morgan and Councillor McKillen are both absent. Councillor Parker.
Present.
Councillor Payne. Councillor
Present.
Pepperell. Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Pepperell.
Present.
Councillor Petty.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Pilgrim.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Present.
Councillor Richardson.
Present.
Chairman is present. Councillor Snedden. Councillor Solomon.
Present.
Councillor Tonkin.
Present.
Councillor Treadaway. Councillor Tucker.
Present.
Councillor Westwood.
Present.
And I'm aware that Councillor Willis is unable to join us because of technical difficulties.
And Nick,
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Snedden has got work commitments, so may also be a little late.
Grateful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Back to you.
Thank you. We now commence with the agenda. Item 1, there are no addresses by members of the public. Apologies for absence. We've had those. Petitions to be presented by members. Councillor Connolly.
Thanks, Chair. So you've probably all seen it, but just to summarise, this petition has 76 signatures from residents, and it's calling on North Somerset Council to resurface the damaged block paved areas around Western Village. This has been an outstanding issue for some time, and as you can see from the petition, there's a fair amount of dissatisfaction in the community about it, and it's hoped that swift action will be taken.
Right, thank you very much. It will be referred to the appropriate executive member, I believe, Councillor Tonkin. Thank you. Item 4, declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests. Item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of November 2020.
I move acceptance.
Thank you. And someone second, please.
Second that, Chairman.
Anyone against?
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
I move they be carried. There are no motions by members. There are no matters referred from previous meetings. Item 8, Chairman's announcements. It's, in a way, I'm sad to report that Councillor Curson, who was the first leader of the council, a Liberal Democrat, recently passed away. Obviously, funerals cannot be attended, but I would bring that to members' attention. I would like to say something, as this is our first meeting of the new year, and the appropriate words used to be standing at the portal of the opening year. That's old-fashioned. But I believe that we have a very difficult year ahead when we will have to make many misunderstood and unpopular decisions. The message simply is we must do the best that we can for those that we represent. And if we do so, I'm sure that we will be able to look back and say confidently that we did the best that we could. We don't normally have mottos in this council, but perhaps I will leave you with one that might carry you forward with a smile. It's a refrain of a very old song out of many people's far distant youth. And it very simply goes, hey ho, off to work we go. That's our job. Let's get on with it. Right, thank you very much indeed. Leaders' announcements.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo your comments about the sad loss of Councillor Nan Curson. It was quite a shock to the community that she'd passed on so suddenly. And thank you for your kind words. On another note around health, sadly, John Lane Morgan is ill in hospital at the moment, so I'm sure we will all send our good wishes to him and urge him a swift recovery and return to the virtual benches. And finally, I'd like to pass on my thanks to our staff and our contractors for all the work they've done over the Christmas and New Year period. I think we've had an exceptionally good piece of work in terms of the catch-up for waste, and I know that colleagues in social care have been out there in all weathers at all times to keep people safe in the community and with the difficulties that they encounter in that in terms of dealing with the pandemic, and also the colleagues who are monitoring everything that was going on over the Christmas and New Year period. I've never been so busy between Christmas and New Year ever, and I think that's it. If I was busy, that's because our staff were all out there working for us, so thank you to all of you. I'd also like to thank the residents in North Somerset who are following the guidance in relation to the lockdown, and thank you very much for your efforts. And finally, I'd like to thank you colleagues, you fellow councillors, for everything you're doing to keep the community safe and the work you're doing to encourage people in these very difficult times. So a big thank you to you all too. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10, the Chief Executive's announcement.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to wish members a very happy new year. And following on from my email last week, I'll be writing to you this week just to update you on the latest news in terms of lockdown, following on from my lockdown email last week, also around COVID, but also around our structure changes. I had hoped we'd be able to say farewell to staff in person in a socially distanced way this month, but unfortunately that's not feasible with a national lockdown. So I will be mailing you on how we can do this in a virtual way and give you the opportunity to get involved and thank those staff who are leaving the organisation. I'd also like to thank, as the leader has, all of our staff for the tireless work in response to the pandemic, on top of business as usual, and indeed the transformational work that continues to go on. I think from Christmas, New Year, that period in between, but also since New Year, we have seen the health and social care system under immense pressure across not just North Somerset, but also Bristol South Gloss, which covers our health footprint. And our staff have done a fantastic job in terms of, for example, helping with discharges of people out of hospital and enabling people as far as possible to remain within the community. And I thank them deeply. As Don has said, as Councillor Davis has said, also wanted to thank all of you and your community leadership, but also our partners, both in terms of our supply chain, our contractors, but also community groups and the voluntary sector who have worked really closely with us in terms of our North Somerset Together response, which really goes from strength to strength, particularly as we work our way through this latest lockdown. And finally, in terms of staff, I suppose it was just to acknowledge that this lockdown is particularly challenging because I know that many of our schools are seeing a challenge around prioritising critical workers, and therefore it's just to bear with us. At times we're making things as flexible as possible for those people who maybe are having to aren't being deemed critical workers in some instances, and therefore having the challenges of homeschooling on top of trying to do their job. So we're working collaboratively with our staff to be as flexible as possible. But it was just to share that with you as members in terms of helping manage expectation. And here's to 2021, and I hope it's better than 2020 with vaccination on its way through. And with that, just to reiterate that our lateral flow testing is beginning to start rolling out over this week and coming weeks, which is great as well for our communities. So thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. The forward plan, the leader.
Colleagues, the forward plan is in the papers. It is for noting. I hope you'll note it.
Any questions? I move it be noted.
Thank you.
Item 12, Policy and Scrutiny Panel Report. Councillor Gibbons.
Thank you. I'm first of all must apologise that we didn't have the opportunity to get this item into the agenda, but sometimes circumstances don't work that way, and it's with regret that I have to announce and inform you that Councillor Richard Tucker has decided to step down from HOSP, both as a panel member and as chair. As you know, Richard had a heart attack over the summer, and you've just heard him in the chat earlier saying how he's been working to recover and get better, and he came back as soon as was medically possible or feasible, and I think it's a testament to his dedication as a councillor that he's done that. But over the last couple of months, he's come to realise that he does need to concentrate on his own health. And so I think it's no secret that when he expressed to us his desire to step down and take things a bit easier, I certainly did try to persuade him to find and look at ways that he could continue and make it less onerous for him. But those of you who know Richard as well as I do, having worked with him for 10 years now, Richard would never do anything that he couldn't give 100% to. So regretfully, I had to accept his decision that he knows best about what he needs to do in terms of his health. So I'd like to thank him so much for all his hard work on HOSP since May 2019, and I'm sure you'll all join me in that. And just to say that, I know he's one of the most experienced, committed and hard-working members of the council, and that he'll go on giving us his invaluable insights and contributions as we go forward. After a lot of discussion within our group and with my executive colleagues, I have asked Councillor Kieran Cronolly to join the HOSP panel, because that is within my gift as group leader. However, I would also like to propose that Councillor Cronolly takes on the role of chair of the Health and Overview Scrutiny Panel. And I would obviously be asking for a seconder. I'd just like to say very briefly that, Kieran, Councillor Cronolly, comes with an impressive skill set. He's a lawyer by training. He currently works for a major national organisation, which is a partner of ours, and he works for them not in North Somerset, but across the country. He's in a senior position where he delivers transformation, and he's got a great deal of experience in project management. And I would also say that he's used to working with a range of organisations and certainly isn't shy of challenging them at the highest level of leadership, which I think is a very positive thing. And I think he'll bring a fresh, inclusive and collaborative approach to this role, because in these challenging times, we value our health services enormously. And there is, I think, an ever greater need that we give them that robust scrutiny of a critical friend, so that we can reassure the residents of North Somerset that we are doing the best for them. So I hope you will welcome and support Councillor Cronolly's bid to become chair of HOSP, and I would ask for a seconder, please.
Don Davis will second.
Thank you.
I think before we go to the vote, we better ask Councillor Connolly if he wishes to do the job.
Yes, would you like to say a few words, Kieran?
Yeah, you've kind of preempted the bit in the chat. So yes would be the answer to that. Just wanted to say a few things. Firstly, to very much echo what Councillor Gibbons said about Councillor Tucker, and as well as Councillor Richardson stepping up whilst Councillor Tucker wasn't here. Just in case the solicitor, regulator, authorities listening, strictly speaking, I'm not a qualified lawyer. Let's get that bit out of the way. So yeah, I just wanted to mention a few other words. So our health service is obviously there for us at our best moments and our worst moments. And as the son of an alcoholic, I know the personal costs of poor health outcomes. So that's what drives my passion in this kind of area. and trying to achieve the best for our communities. And should you, wish to appoint me as chair, that's certainly something I'll continue to embrace. And obviously, I'm really mindful that over the next few weeks, a HOSP panel does need to meet. So should you choose to appoint me as chair, I will start to contact you all individually and as a group, because we really need to start to motor on some of that. So that's just a heads up. But that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
Beg your pardon?
I said there's nothing indicated, Chairman.
Right, thank you. In which case then we had better put this to the vote to make it official. So is there anyone against the appointment?
Nothing shown, Chairman.
Anyone abstaining?
Again, nothing, Chairman.
I was going to technically abstain on myself. Sorry.
Yes.
The solicitor will probably tell me off because he's supposed to do this, but you are approved, sir, as chairman. Item 13, corporate parenting responsibilities. Councillor Gibbons. This is to be noted, I believe.
Yes, indeed. It's a brief report for noting, and I'm hoping that members have all read through it, because there was a nice list of extra reading for you all. So, like me being in teacher mode, I'm giving you a reading list as corporate parents at the back there. I just wanted to say to all of you, Happy New Year, fellow corporate parents, and to thank everybody who contributed to the fund for a gift for our older care leavers. I was hoping to give you a final figure for that, but the money is still coming in. We've had a couple of extra donations today, so I will update you by email as to the amount that was finally raised on that. And I think that's just fantastic how much everyone is thinking about the young people in our care and engaged. I'd like to say also thank you to all of those who've signed up to the Introduction to Children's Services sessions that we are running, the first one being on Monday. We've had a good response. And I think this just goes to show how this council is really taking on board that young people, children and their interests should be at the heart of everything we do, much as we are committed to looking at the impacts of climate change in every decision. I would just like you as members to think about the impact every decision we make and take and talk about has for young people, children, and particularly our looked after children in North Somerset. I'm not going to go through this brief report, which was compiled so ably by our Director of Children's Services, Sheila Smith, but if you have any questions on it, then please go ahead. Otherwise, I'd like you to note it and look at the recommendations where you're asked to consider if there's anything more you'd like to know, either via briefings or a future council meeting. And if you wish to request a corporate parenting report following the visit to North Somerset in March of the National Implementation Advisor for Care Leavers, Mark Riddle. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
No request, Chairman.
Thank you. I move the report be noted. Item 14, question time. There was one written question, and I believe an answer is going to be given verbally.
Thank you, Chair. There was a request from Councillor Charles, so thank you for that question. I was as shocked as you, and I'm sure we all were on this meeting, and indeed people watching from members of the public, by what happened in Washington last week, as indeed I was by events in both Saudi Arabia and Hong Kong recently too. So I shall get you a written answer. I shall refer question 1 and 3 to my colleague Councillor Holland, and question 2 to both Councillor Holland and Councillor Cartman, and ask them to respond in writing in greater detail for you. With regards to scrutiny, that is not within my direct gift, but I will ask the chair of the COCO panel for his and his panel's considerations of your question. And perhaps it's Steve Bridger I can see on the screen. If he's happy to do that, then that would complete my answer.
Absolutely.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Charles?
No, thank you. I think you covered it adequately. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Item 15, there are no matters referred from the executive. 16, no reports. 17, the Audit Committee. Councillor Cato.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to present the annual report of the Audit Committee as you see it in the papers, and I want to say a few words about it. I would say that in overview, the purpose of the Audit Committee is to provide those charged with governance, and that means all of us in fact, independent assurance on the adequacy of the risk management framework, internal control environment, and the integrity of financial reporting and governance processes. By overseeing both internal and external audit activity, it makes an important contribution to ensuring that effective assurance arrangements are in place. The committee is supported by a range of officers, notably the Director of Finance and Property, the S151 officer, Head of Corporate Accountancy, Democratic Services, the Independent Internal Auditors, Audit West, the Independent External Auditors, Grant Thornton, and also by frequent contact with other audit committees in other authorities that kindly share their views, methods of working and ideas. And I want to thank them, all our officers and all of our supporting committees and agencies for their very good and supportive work. It cannot be underestimated actually how good they've been, how they keep stepping up. We've given consideration to the following main areas during the last year or so. Internal audit, risk management, internal control frameworks, performance improvement, information management and accessibility, climate emergency governance and internal control, training for the audit committee, which is absolutely essential, external best practice and peer education, treasury management, and we've received also reports and briefings on counter fraud, whistleblowing, anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption, risk management, the corporate risk register, treasury management, local government finance, the impacts of COVID-19 on the North Somerset Council finances, COVID-19 emergency governance and decision-making arrangements, and the COVID-19 risk register, of course, capital projects, the Redmond review, which is importantly coming to the committee on the 28th, and I welcome anybody to come along to that. This is going to make some more changes to audit work. And the business support grant funding and the anti-fraud work around that. In addition, the audit committee training has been received from the LAQF, the LGA, internal auditors, external auditors, and we're keen that more external formal training for all the audit committee is undertaken as a regular annual process. It's absolutely essential we do that. I also want to say that as an active part of its role in governance, the Audit Committee is undertaking a review of the North-South Link Road project to identify potential learnings for the Council. This is seen as a key learning framework for this project and also for other major projects being undertaken by the Council. The Audit Committee is committed to the principles of openness, effectiveness and collaboration. And with that in mind, I want to welcome all members to attend our formal Audit Committee meetings. The next one is on the 28th. And where appropriate, if you are interested in our informal briefings or reviews, please just let me know. With that said, I want to say one final thing, that the Audit Committee has continually stepped up to the plate to do this. They've put an enormous amount of work in to help keep everything overviewed and scrutinised from the point of view of governance. So I recommend receipt of the Audit Committee report by the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
Thank you. I move that it be noted. Item 18, Councillor Tucker, Fire Authority.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Pleased to present the regular report from the Fire Authority. It has been checked and okayed by the Fire Authority Chairman, so hopefully I've got everything all correct and proper, so I'll do my best to answer any questions that members may have.
Are there any questions?
Nothing indicated, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. We'll now move on to the Avon and Somerset Police Crime Panel. Councillor Willis.
I believe Councillor Willis is not present, Chairman.
In which case then I move that it be noted, and anyone has any questions, they can direct them to Councillor Willis. Thank you. West of England Joint Scrutiny Committee, Councillor James.
Thank you very much, Chair. As well as what's in the written report, I've attended 2 subsequent meetings. An informal meeting of the West of England Overview and Scrutiny, and also a meeting of Bristol City Council. What's coming up in the West of England agenda? So obviously there'll be a long pause ahead of the election, but before the pause, there will be a housing delivery strategy going forward. There'll be an item on decarbonising transport in the West of England, which obviously is very relevant to the aims and objectives of the climate emergency update next, and a bus recovery update. So those are all things that are going on. If you would like to know more, do go to me or the chair of the Joint Scrutiny Commission, and also feel free to contact any of our North Somerset Council officers to find out more. In terms of, I attended a meeting Bristol City Council where Mayor Marvin Rees spent 2 hours talking about North Somerset and the West of England Combined Authority. I won't go into the details because there were some things that I did not agree with. It was a very frustrating meeting if you want North Somerset to join with immediacy. But what's important that came out of that meeting is the way forward for North Somerset joining the West of England is very clear. It's outside of the election, and that should be legal. So Mayor Rees's challenge to all local authorities and to the Scrutiny Commission was to work to create that deal for the West. And so I've contacted the Scrutiny Chair to start that work. I'd just like to, thank Shazia Dyer, who's the legal officer for WECA, for getting information from the Secretary of State. Has been very useful, and also for Nick Brain and Don for sharing information. The information flow from this authority is very good, which I'm very happy and proud of. And that's about everything, but I imagine there'll probably be some questions.
Are there any questions for Councillor James?
Nothing's been indicated in chat, Chairman.
Anyway, thank you, Councillor James.
Fair enough.
We will move on to climate emergency, item 19, agenda item, Councillor Petty.
Hello, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So I had hoped to present to you some slides to summarise some of the points that are made in this 6-monthly report, but it appears I didn't do the timings right, so my apologies. But you do all have a copy of the report, and so I thought I would just highlight a few of the details that came out of that. So as per the climate emergency agreement, we agreed that every 6 months the council officers and myself would come back to report to full council the progress being made. So the report will provide specific progress on a few key activities, as well as a half-year update on the council's carbon footprint, which we felt was appropriate due to the significant changes of the working patterns in response to COVID-19. The report has been circulated and contains an annex with brief descriptions of the progress against each item of the action plan. Progress has been made on almost all of the items. Overall, from the gas and electricity consumption between April and September in 2020, these have decreased by 401 tonnes of CO2 emissions. This is 23% compared to the April to September in 2019. This would be a large part due to the reduced energy consumption where buildings have either been closed, such as libraries and children's centres, or operating at a reduced capacity, such as the North Somerset Council offices. Approximately half of the emissions reduction is also due to the reduction in energy consumption from street lighting as a result of the LED replacement programme, which was always scheduled to take place. And so this has led to a reduction of emissions of 198 tonnes of CO2 equivalent over the same period. It's estimated that a maximum of 20% of the workforce are able to work in the office currently, meaning for the last 6 months, we should expect to have seen a minimum reduction of commuting emissions of 80%, which would be around 280 tonnes of CO2. If I move on to the action planning, there is a very large and long list of climate actions. And in reality, almost all of them need to be done in order to get us to net zero. So it is a large challenge. But in order to make and monitor achievable progress, we need to ensure that we're tracking the right ones, tracking and tackling the right ones first. So we've used an exercise in action planning to identify the quick wins, the large work that needs significant funding and planning, and the transformational change, things which require mindset changes and organisational changes. This work is now being incorporated into a new cross-council transformation programme, and recommendations are also being incorporated into the next budget. In doing this work, the officers have found that the most urgent actions fell into 4 broad categories: decarbonising the council, decarbonising transport, policy development, and finally, communications, engagement and support. Because we can't do this alone, we need to be engaging with our residents and supporting people through this. The Climate Emergency Action Plan states that the council needs to take leadership role across the area to encourage, support and enable others to reduce carbon emissions. One of the best ways that we've identified to do that is to do it through our council, ensure that the council employees are fully on board with the strategy and that acting on the climate emergency is embedded into everything we do. So I'm delighted that in the autumn we embarked on carbon literacy, which is an awareness of the carbon dioxide costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. I'm delighted that North Somerset Council can now be certified as a carbon literate organisation, and we are giving employees the green light to suggest and implement carbon reduction actions. A few other things on the action plan that are taking place and are likely to be reported to in the following 6 months would be that energy efficiency audits have taken place. There are 34 on our buildings so far. Green homes grants, renewable energy feasibility studies. We're participating and joining in the UK 100 and specifically a countryside climate network, so focus on rural councils coming together. The Parklands Village is delivering 15% zero carbon homes. Uplands in Nailsea being a flagship project of 52 homes at Passive Design. Urban Design Panel and the local plan consultation, which really is the planning of how we can implement climate emergency or respond to it. So I'm sorry that it didn't get presented and packaged in a presentation way that I had hoped. And just to finally close, I just want to vein and highlight that the council's emissions represent approximately 1% of the area of the whole of North Somerset. And it's actually important that the area, not only the council, get down to net zero. So last night when I watched I Am Greta on iPlayer, it just reminded me and highlighted for me that the children are asking us to act now. The future generations need us to act now. We are the councillors, but we are community leaders. We have stood up and we are facing significant issues and challenges all around us. But we must act with urgency. We must lobby and we must communicate. So we must lobby up to our government and we must communicate and bring the public with us and work across many sectors. So thank you for everything you're doing and please continue to participate in the action around climate emergency and keep this at the top of our agendas. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Councillor Petty?
Yes, Chairman, there are 3 that wish to speak. Shall I call them in turn for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Councillor Crewe first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on the moving forward on the street lighting now is good. I do have one problem which I think needs looking at. We have a situation in Westwick where we haven't adopted the roads simply because the street lighting there, many of the lights come on through the day, not the evening, and a lot of lights are on all the time. Now, this has been going on for over 18 months now. Yes, it's low energy lighting, but we are still wasting energy and still the developer has not sorted it out, which is why we've not adopted the highway, which in turn is going to give us a problem with a new development going ahead, because there are road changes that need to be made that can't be done until these streetlights are sorted out. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Codling, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Petty, as well for your report and for reporting back to us. It is indeed, I think it's something at the top of most of our agendas. I have I suppose a question as well as a comment, really. It's absolutely right, I think, that you highlight, and it has been prioritised, that to make real difference in this, it takes all parties, as in national government, local government, individuals, and that is obviously a key part. And it's great to hear that council officers are being really encouraged and set free, I think you said something like that, to suggest initiatives. That's really important. They're the professionals who know their services the best. And I'm so pleased to see that we're sort of reflecting the national government ambitions as well around making real impact on this. But my question for our responsibility is around how do we manage to associate our actions, things we stop doing, what we spend on, what we direct resource to, how do we attribute that to some sort of measures of success? So basically, how do we know the impact that we're having? Some of that I appreciate is terribly difficult, particularly around behaviour change in communities. But I'd just like to understand a bit more about the model for that, please.
I'm going to see if is it okay to draw in an officer at this point, because Nicola Webb is on the call and she may be able to, she's the Climate Emergency Project Manager, and she may be able to comment to that. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I hope Nicola's available. I know that her camera doesn't often work.
I'm here, yes. My camera doesn't work, I'm afraid. So thank you, Councillor Petty. Thank you, Councillor Codling. It is, like you say, it is, in some instances, it's quite difficult to attribute directly, particularly with behaviour change. But where we are making changes, for example, to roads, we are able to monitor the change in the number of cars using those roads. And when we are building cycle tracks, we are monitoring how many people are using those cycle tracks. And in general, we found that more people are using them than we expect in the first place. We're also able to monitor directly energy consumption at a building level for our own buildings, but also at a council area for buildings for electricity consumption and gas consumption. So some things we can monitor, but not always directly attribute. But yes, there are lots of different ways, and I think we should be able to put together more detailed outputs as we go for each separate action.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it's outcomes we need to focus on, not outputs. But thank you, Nicola.
Yes.
I think I'll also just add that I do think the value, although it's still to continue to be improved, our decision papers all have a heading around climate emergency. And so they all need to, so when you're making a decision on anything in the council, and I actually think this is a really key important factor, so that any decision that's getting approved has taken that into consideration. I still think there's additional training we continue to build on, but it's the start of a better system, so that it's acknowledging the potential impact and costs and outcomes associated with any change of activity. But I think that recording of behavioural change is also something that continues to be a big challenge to the whole sector. Are there any more questions?
Yes, Councillor Gibbons wishes to speak, Chairman.
And then Councillor Bryant.
Yes, noted, Councillor Bryant.
Right, is it me? Thank you. Thanks, Bridget, for that report. I just wanted to ask a question about, you mentioned in the report that obviously our emissions as a council are down because the buildings are closed, etc., etc. Do we have any indication of an increase, let's say, in emissions in the region because people are stuck at home and they are working from home and they're using resources there? So I'm just wondering, are we actually balancing out? Are we staying at square one, or is there a genuine improvement? And my second question is something, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I had somebody email me a report, and it was around the move to sort of get people cycling more and close off streets to cars, and just generally the sort of things a lot of us want to happen. But this person was saying that this is, in their perception, a very middle class movement. And I'm just wondering to what extent, when we look at our poorer communities, we're actually able to engage them in the climate change behaviours, because they, you know, there's a recent report out during lockdown, poorest families with children have actually increased their spending across the board by 36%, whereas the rest of us have the choices to be able to reduce spending. So I'm just wondering to what extent we are able to take poorer communities with us on this journey, or are their choices so limited it makes it hard?
I think that those are two very different and interesting questions. So the first one I think is interesting. I can see that somebody says something in the chat, but I'm just, so as I understand, I will pull Nicola in, but I'm kind of reflecting that I'm aware that when each household has a choice about what energy tariff, if they can choose energy tariffs that can be clean energy. But at the moment, most car journeys are in cars that are polluting, so they are petrol or diesel. And so I think if you can do a direct comparison, the energy from homes can be clean energy, but unfortunately the vehicles. So I'll ask Nicola if she'd like to elaborate on that, or whether she has any data, which we may not have it yet.
Yeah, so in terms of data, I am collecting data from a group of employees who have volunteered to be able to share their data. It's a little bit early, unfortunately, to be able to give you any results from it. But in general, at a national level, it is believed that working from home is a lower emission option than commuting in. But most of our employees work relatively locally, so whether that's a big change, I don't know. Also, if we wanted to compare that with real data, with metered data for the whole area, that won't be out actually for another year, so we won't be able to tell that. So I think it will balance out. I don't think it will end up that we are spending or emitting more from our homes, but I don't want to say that for certain yet, unfortunately.
With regards to the second question, I think it's a very important question. I think that if safe walkways and safe cycling routes can be provided, then in principle it should save families money, that they don't need to be running a car. I would like to see families in the future not needing to pay for a car that can be very costly. But I do agree that it's a challenge to bring all of our communities with us, and certainly if we're hearing of households having to up their home spends, I think that the challenge of children not attending school and having their cooked meals is an important factor in some households, which is worrying, but the truth fact at the moment. So I think that as a council, as an administration, I think that we're committed to trying to work with all of our community and bring all of our community on this journey with us with regards to climate emergency. And like Catherine, I know that you and I are both passionate to work with more school children and the different educational organisations, so that bring our children on this journey and they will go and pester their parents and keep them informed and keep us all moving in the right direction. Again, sorry, Nikki, do you have anything further on that specific question?
I think so. I ran a carbon literacy training course this morning, and there is an awful lot in there about equality, community resilience, those sides of things, and the co-benefits that can come from climate action. I know that actions such as insulating your home or buying an electric vehicle do come at a price, and that is not necessarily something that is available to everyone, unless you are clued up and able to access things like the Green Homes Grant, which I know is not necessarily easy. But as Bridget says, where we're able to help with those things, where we're able to support people to access those sorts of funding, then it can help to support more vulnerable communities. And then also when it comes to cycling and walking, with better active transport infrastructure, it can really even things out as well.
Councillor Bryant, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have two questions I'd like to put to the executive member, Petty. The first one is, what strikes my attention, is shown on the charts on page 7, and it refers to our ageing fleet of vehicles. And it says that we currently have 95 vehicles, 33 are electric vehicles, a further 30 of our fleet vehicles will be replaced with electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids by early 2021. Could she describe what vehicles these actually are? Because in the description it doesn't.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bryant. I may have to come back to you with more detail. However, I do remember when I first took on the role and met with the transport team, I'm aware that there was definitely the Meals on Wheels vehicles. But following everything that happened last year, there was a discussion about that additional purchase, and I actually have asked them to reinvestigate what vehicles we still need and based on the behaviours of what might be taking place in the future. So I think that given we're still in this place of this pandemic, I think that I believe that the team are probably still currently reviewing, and I believe that data is probably now inaccurate. I don't anticipate a significant purchase of vehicles in early 2021. So thank you for picking that up, and I will follow up and provide you a more detailed answer.
If you'll allow me,
sure.
You see, within the waste management team, there are over 60 vehicles, 50 of which are the trucks, others are front loaders or fork loaders and such like. Now, I'm very concerned about these because they are all diesel vehicles. And we well know about the young girl with asthma in London fairly recently. And on her death certificate, it was put down that it was a contributory factor of pollution from the roads. And as our vehicles linger, I think that'd be the best word to use, whilst collecting the various forms of waste, they are giving off all the time these toxic fuels. And therefore, I don't think it's mentioned in your report, but I think it's something we should very seriously look at.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Nikki, are you familiar with some of the information about the waste vehicles?
Yeah, so it is definitely something that that we are reviewing and will be looking to replace all of these vehicles. In terms of air quality, it is a different issue. It is not necessarily a less, it's not something that we're not worried about. But the using diesel in these vehicles is not going to cause significant air quality problems in the area. But that doesn't mean that we want to be using diesel vehicles for either air quality or climate change issues.
I think that, so just to expand upon that, so as I understand it, the air quality team have monitored many of our key locations, and at this time we are very fortunate in North Somerset that we have not got any high risk polluting areas, unlike Bristol, like the way that Bristol currently suffers. And I would highlight the places such as when you have commuter traffic and children walking to school. I think that I think that our waste vehicles are contributors to pollution, but I don't think that it's the only factor. But we are aware of the age of the fleet and then when they might likely need replacing.
Councillor Cato, Chairman.
Oh, excuse me, Chairman, I did say a second question.
Apologies, Councillor Bryant, I thought you'd asked it.
Thank you. Chairman, on page 6 of the report, it also makes mention there about encouraging people to cycle to work, and it mentions £2,500 for electric bikes. Just a question, is this that the council are intending to loan up to that amount to employees?
So I can answer that one, Councillor Bryant.
Yeah.
The Cycle to Work scheme has been around for a number of years, and I'm delighted that I used it 10 years ago. And so what it is that it's a purchase scheme where if you're an employee of a company who is committed to the Right to Work scheme, the bike is purchased and then the employee pays for it out of their salary on a monthly basis. And it's a government scheme and an excellent government initiative. But with the increase in popularity of electric bikes, and electric bikes often costing between 800 and 2,500, it seemed more appropriate that there was. So I think previously North Somerset Council had a cap of around the 700 or 800 mark. And so instead the council has decided to increase that amount so that we enable and encourage people to our staff to purchase electric bikes should they want to, so that if their commuting journey is a bit further. And so what happens is that 2,500 is the purchase price, and that employee pays that off over a number of months, I think a year. If you terminate your employment, the employee then has to pay the remainder of that money. So it isn't an ongoing cost to the council.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Cato, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Petty. I think you know already that I've been asking for some time, and I know how hard it is, but I'm very keen that we move to a point where we get metrics on the climate category for all reports and all projects, so that we get something actually measurable. We can tell the direction of travel on everything we're doing. So that we consciously make decisions that we're going away from our target or we're going towards it, and to some extent by how much. And I do know how hard it is to do this, but I do think it's absolutely essential if we're going to get anywhere. So I just want to keep flagging this one up and keep saying whatever we can do to support you on getting the answers to that, can we do it?
I hope you support me then when I suggest that I believe there is more resource required to the climate emergency team to enable that kind of work to be established and implemented.
Certainly I understand that, and I also think that somehow we need to be lobbying central government to help support this, because it seems to me that rather than each individual local authority trying to invent their own wheels, it needs to be something which is more universal than that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. And I think that you're aware that one of my pledges to following the carbon literacy training was that I pledged to write to central government with a number of demands, but basically recognition of a number of key areas. I didn't want it to be an overly arduous list, but I intended to do it on a 6-monthly basis. But that has prompted a response from one of our local MPs, and I will be having a follow-up conversation with him next week. Nikki, do you want to come in with is there any updates or news on the metrics factors? Any other authorities achieving a good way of managing this?
So there is actually a piece of work going on led by WECA at the moment that we will be able to be involved in, looking at the carbon implications of particular investments. It's mostly looking at local plans and how locations of building and types of building and types of developments will impact emissions. But we're hoping that there will be other applications as well of when it comes out later in the spring, I think.
Councillor James, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I suppose my question is just looking at all these reports, you can see lots of individual projects, trying to understand the bigger piece. Is this progress that we would expect for a council that takes climate change seriously and that wants to meet the 2030 targets? Looking at this, will we meet the 2030 targets? Are we very far away, or are we near there? Is there anything that you can say to sort of get some because in terms of monitoring it, obviously, yes, you can see the individual projects, but I suppose there's nothing to, it would be useful to have, get some insight whether you think this is a council that has taken things seriously or whether it's greenwashing. I'm not saying it is greenwashing, I'm saying I'd like to sort of know, both from an officer level and from you, Bridget, do you think that this is a council that takes climate change seriously and will vaguely meet the 2030 goals, or at least actually have a proper stab at it?
Thank you, Councillor James. I actually think it's a really great question, because I spend each week and sometimes each day going up and down with, because I think you and I are both, along with many of the other councillors across our whole administration, are very concerned and take this situation very, very seriously. And it's fair to say that on some days I'm like, we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough. But on other days, I have a lot of hope. And I do believe that the carbon literacy training that we have started to implement is a game changer. For me, when you embed stuff, it is about embedding it in our organisation. And I can honestly say that I was delighted that we had the Chief Executive, Joe Walker, we had other senior management, other directors on this day training, and subsequently different people said, I really believe that we should be taking this harder and faster, or I believe that we should be, this is what I think we could do. And so for me, it's not, and many people will tell you that climate emergency shouldn't be siloed in one or two staff, because it's not about that one person doing something, but it's about so many people elsewhere, maybe stopping doing things, or maybe making sure they're doing things differently. And so for me, the fact that Nikki today, Nicola Webb, has been providing carbon literacy training to more of our officers today. She was doing it before Christmas. She will keep doing it. And I will also ask to plea and welcome all councillors who were unable to attend last time. You are welcome to attend, and I will make sure that Nikki's subsequent dates are made available to you. I think you'll find it a really interesting, informative and empowering session that I would implore you all to join, and you were invited last time and you were invited again. So for me, that action is important, and that embedding is important, and we're making good progress. We will need to commit to a budget for next year that makes the climate emergency important and really puts more resource to it, because it's not about resting on laurels. And we know that this authority has had less staff for a long time. If I compare it to our neighbours, then I often feel like we haven't been committing to it properly. But I know that now we're all working in the right direction. Reaching the 2030 net zero is very, 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 very challenging to do. So all we can do is make sure that every time we're making decisions, every time we're coming back and reporting, we're pushing it harder and making sure we all keep it at the top of the agenda for everybody's future. And we are facing problems now. Flooding is a problem now, and when the hot summers come, or they come too early, that impacts our crops and it impacts our communities. So I think that it is a climate emergency that we're experiencing now, and I think we need to continue to act in that way. And if we can keep doing that, keeping up the agenda, and keep lobbying central government to do everything they can to allow us to enact on the important changes, and then likewise bringing our community. We can't forget that the council is one body, but our residents are some others, and we need to. I enjoy engaging with our community through my social media channels and conversations I have in the street, and I think we can all continue to do that. And the council is doing a good job in using eLife, its Facebook pages and things like that to communicate the climate work. And I'm delighted that we now have moved the climate emergency page on the website to a more prominent location, and we'll continue to use that. So I welcome anybody who also wants to help make videos and that kind of thing on the subject. Keep informing people.
Thank you very much. If it's all right, just to ask if there is some way to in future, it's really useful getting this progress report, but if there is some way to make it very clear, as well as the individual projects, the systemic change, like that, the actual difference made in total, and whether we are going to achieve those climate targets, that would be really good. I get that I'm asking for a very difficult thing, but it would be really useful, just especially for members to understand, Because I imagine most members will look through these tables and think, what on earth is all this on about? As well as members of the public, of course.
Well, let's continue to try to present it better and things. Sorry. Start at the beginning of your question. Sorry, about presenting it. I think we do need to continue to present it. But there was another point you made. Sorry, at the beginning of that question.
I'm not quite sure if this is a bit. Just the systemic change.
Yes. Sorry, I wanted to say that in the pledges we all make off the carbon literacy, I do feel like so at the end of the session, everybody's making pledges, and I do think that maybe there's something to be done with the commitments and taking those pledges and presenting them back to our community, and bringing the public with us to also make pledges. I think that's quite an effective tool. But I completely agree that we're facing such a large challenge, and I'm not ready to give up yet. I'm not ready to give up on anybody's future, and that's why I'm continuing to work hard on this.
Councillor Bell, Chairman.
Thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Petty and Nikki for this report, which is really helpful. And I suppose I would summarise it as being a good start, because I think exactly as Councillor Petty has just said, you know, we're on a journey here, aren't we? And we've got a long way to go. And I think it's also worth recognising that it might well be a journey where it could be some time before we really know whether we're getting anywhere or not. So it's a tricky one. But actually, I wanted to make one comment and ask one question. So the question was really around what yourself, Councillor Petty and Nikki, think the benefits of the current pandemic will be in terms of the climate emergency and the opportunities to reinvent the way particularly our economy works, and what we're able to do as a council to do more to sort of embed some of that for the longer term. So I'd be interested to hear your views on that. And in terms of the report, I think there's always a danger in anything really, but particularly it feels in terms of some of our responses and interventions on the climate emergency. I think there's always a danger that we have a long list of things that we want to do, and we're not always very clear about any sense of priority around those. So I think in the report, for example, we have attempted to identify impact and deliverability, but what I think we haven't been so good at is drawing a parallel between cause and effect. So because I think when we're making decisions, and you've talked about the budget, for example, when we're making decisions about investments and in terms of the priorities that we've got for action, I think we really need to understand clearly what the effect of some of those interventions will be. So if we're making a case for more investment, what's the result going to be? How do we demonstrate to taxpayers that we're going to reap the return that we say that we're going to get? And I think in the report in future, it would be really helpful, and I know it is difficult, but I think it would be really helpful to be as specific as we can be about some of those cause and effects, and where we can rank some of the actions that we've taken and the impacts that they've had, because I think that will enable all of us to have more confidence and understanding about how to make decisions going forward. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Bell. I think that you're right to say it is still the start of a long journey. And I think that long journey does need to be appropriately resourced. And so we will continue to endeavour to do that. And I agree that the way that we present the information can always, I think co-benefits is a term that is commonly used in reference to what the outcomes that might, or the results that might be achieved, and how often it's not only a benefit of a carbon reduction, but you might also gain health benefits. And one of the examples would be rewilding, because it's complex. The benefits may not be felt today when you see some sticks in the ground that don't really look like trees. But if we can wait those 5 years, those 10 years and 15, then you will see not only the benefit to wildlife and biodiversity, but you will also see a more rich environment for our communities to be enjoying, both young and old. So I think that it's, and sometimes you're right, absolutely, in presenting that. You talked about the results out the other side of the pandemic. I'm still going to struggle with the word benefit, because I think we're just still in that really difficult time. But I think that cycling and walking is one factor. So obviously people's lives have slowed down, and right now we're not allowed to go anywhere beyond our village and our very local area. So I think appreciating and discovering the natural environment around us, but exploring what we can walk to and what we can cycle to. I think I'm going to bring in Nikki now, actually, on the green recovery, but I'm happy to come back in a bit on skills.
Absolutely, thank you. So I think with COVID, there's definitely have been risks of climate change looking less important and people being less worried. And I've definitely heard people saying, you know, it shows it's not an emergency, or this proves that it's not really, you know, it's not this big problem. But also there are surprising, the opposite is also true. So many people are much more engaged, much more worried about climate change. I think COVID has really demonstrated our vulnerabilities and lack of preparation as a society for things that we know are risks. And actually it's made us a lot more aware of things like the inequality. So we know that some people are much more vulnerable to the effects of climate change, as they have been to coronavirus. So it means that a lot of the preparations that are being made, and I mean this nationally and globally, not just in North Somerset, but the preparations that we're making for rebuilding the economy are considering a lot of things that I'm not sure that we considered before. And I think we're learning from mistakes, from rebuilding, from the credit crunch previous problems. And like Councillor Petty says, the cycling and walking is a big change for us. There are big behavioural changes that are happening now that we never would have expected to happen as quickly as this, and things that we've been saying for years and years and years needed to happen that nobody was acting on. And as a result of COVID, we are acting on them. And there is money coming out from government for rebuilding in a green way. Whether it's enough, whether it's ambitious enough, I don't know yet. We will have to wait and see on that. But I think there are definitely some positives to the way that things have changed.
I think I'll come back in with, I'll comment just that in terms of green recovery, I think that North Somerset is a good tourist location, and tourism has changed. And I think that people haven't been able to take their holidays on aeroplanes this year. But I wonder how many will really go back to that. Some people will say lots of people will go back to that, and others say no. I think people have realised that the UK has a lot to offer in holiday destinations, or maybe people won't be able to afford to, and they'll go for weekend trips. So I hope that part of it will be North Somerset's tourism economy can be something, but it can be a greener tourist economy. I also think that the skills that we can be helping people identify for retraining, some of the sectors will not return in the same way, but there are retraining opportunities. I think that the massive job of retrofitting all of our properties, it's not everybody lives in a new build. Many of us have these houses, and these houses will remain. So how can we make them better insulated and more efficient? I think that there are numerous jobs in that sector, and then the green energy sector as well. And finally, we all value our natural environment and our outdoors, but we also know that there is ash dieback coming. But I hope that people might train to do some of the outdoor skills of maintaining our woodlands and our outdoor spaces, but we'll see. Is there anything, Mike, was there anything there that I haven't quite answered, or?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Councillor Charles, Chairman.
Bridget, this isn't a criticism, this is more like a friendly warning. I know that sounds a bit menacing, I didn't mean to. But what I would like to go back to is Councillor Gibbons' remark with regards to different aspects of society and how society can take part in the climate change work and tackle the climate change emergency. My concern is I still believe that the environmental agenda is something that is able to be pursued by those with privilege and those with resources to actually do it effectively. And therefore, we must have resources at hand or strategies at hand to combat that as well. And until we do, I think we are going to reach obstacles. I also think as well, what you are proposing and what you've done great work on and what you're doing is change. It's cultural change, it's change management. And what that needs is community engagement expertise and community engagement knowledge that this local authority does not have. And what we need is to have that, because I think we have made mistakes where we have turned potential allies into foes, and we have created mistakes where we've created antagonism because we do not have that skill set at an officer level within the authority. And if we are to proceed with your ambitious goals, we need to invest in it.
Sorry, Councillor Petty.
I think I'm going to answer it because it was quite. I think. Thank you very much, Councillor Charles, for your comments and your feedback. I absolutely agree that engagement is important, and I'm going to bring Nikki Webb in to comment more. But I'm not going to completely agree that the label of caring about the climate emergency is only for one class of our society. I disagree. I believe that all of our society understands what is going on here. I believe that all of our society cares about the future of their children. And I don't believe that this has not been explained to. I want to stop the label of siloing our society like that. And I want to stop believing that those who are financially strained cannot care about our futures and cannot make those kind of commitments. They are probably not having a holiday, and they are probably not owning 2 cars. So they are the ones who are already doing their bit. But I think it's important that we achieve climate justice, and it's important that we deliver climate justice for all. So I'll continue to work with all of our communities and all of our society, but I also will pinhole people into claiming that they can't get on board with this subject, because actually I haven't seen that to be the case. So thank you for your comment, and I think that we'll continue that work. But I'll bring Nikki in at that point. Nicola Webb, hopefully.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say that the issue with it being something that some people can or can't get involved in, it's true that everybody cares and everyone can care, but the other thing as well is that the poorer members of the society are not the ones with the big carbon footprint. So I can't remember the exact stat, but it's the top 10% of global emissions, or the top 10% of the population cause 50 or 60% of global emissions. And actually that top 10% is people earning over £27,000 a year. So it's an awful lot of us and those people who are below that £27,000 a year are causing a very small amount of climate issue. And I'm not saying that we should. So initiatives to tackle fuel poverty are initiatives to tackle fuel poverty, and they will keep people safe, they will keep people warm, and they will enable people to have much more comfortable lives. And they are not designed to reduce emissions. It is a different thing, and they often get lumped together. Yeah, that's my point, sorry.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, can I have a right of reply? Because I think Councillor Petty has completely misunderstood my point.
Go for it, Gareth. Go for it, Councillor Charles.
Okay. Yes, I totally agree with you that every section of society is aware in some extent and believes the importance of a climate emergency and the environmental impact. What I am saying is sometimes the steps you can take are priced out of the remit of many people in different sections of society. I buy organic. I know many who can't afford it. I have an office job, so I don't have to cycle to work. You know, I don't have to get a car to work, but someone in a factory job in Avonmouth has to. And because there isn't any public transport services. So that was my point, and that was my kind of argument on that. And sometimes, because I know you're passionate, Bridget, and I know many other people are, that you actually put more people off than on, because what happens is that people feel that you are saying to them they must give up what they're doing to survive to actually achieve this objective. And I know that's not what you're saying, and that's why I think we need the community engagement skills to actually put that message across.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. That's fine. Acknowledged your comment. So I think, and also just to add, very happy to receive comment from any councillors when they see a report and they think that it could have additional comment or framing that would feel more accessible, or because I think, you know, we as 50 councillors all have a role to play, and so we know that we're strapped on the officers, but if we have skills to share, then I think that we should share where we can so that we make our communications as effective as possible. So welcome to receiving that comment on other occasions as well.
And Councillor Westwood, Chairman.
Can I speak, Chairman?
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
That's all right. Thank you. I pressed a button and I was incommunicado for a moment. Carry on.
Ah, that's all right then. Nice place, incommunicado. Okay, so yeah, just to sort of give Bridget a bit of support, as it were. I must admit, I found the education process as far as the carbon literacy training, and I got my certificate. I undertook the training with several of the officers because I couldn't get into the initial one, which was more designed for the members. It basically gives you a means of getting individual understanding and education and precision as far as what we can do regarding the climate emergency. Stuff we can do, basically, not just exhortation, although exhortation has its place. But, you know, it became clear to me that there are practical things as an authority we can do, such as far as any housing developments over which we have influence, they should be to standards. For example, the simple standard of not being connected to gas, basically, so that the emissions from gas boilers are one of the main contributors to people's carbon footprints. If we have a major move towards re-equipping with electrical means of heating water, super kettles effectively, we will cut emissions remarkably, and we should be doing that and making sure as an authority we go for stuff that is under our control or stuff we've got influence over, and we do it. There you go. So like I said, not just exhortation, not just asking people to do stuff, but making sure that they have got a house and that house is as good and low as far as its carbon footprint is concerned as possible. There you go. That's what we should be doing, and that's what I suspect, you know, those of us on the authority will drive towards. Stuff that we can do, stuff we can identify. Let's get on with it.
No more speakers, Chairman.
Right. I have one rather mundane observation, and I'm not going to prolong the debate any further if I can help it. We may have a hot summer. In your report, you talk about long grass. That is a big fire risk in an urban area, so please make provision if it should occur, because we can't always get the fire brigade to help. Right, we will now move on to item 20, medium-term financial plan. Councillor Carman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the first step over this meeting and the next one where we come together and approve, hopefully, our annual budget, which is part of the medium-term financial plan, and also our capital programme and our treasury management, and also set the council tax as well. And this update is following other updates I've given to the executive, and it follows announcements from government about their spending review and their settlement for local government finance. So it's, if you like, the first kind of cohesive, balanced budget view of where we think we're going to go, with some initial proposals in there. The report's there for councillors to read. I'm not going to go through it, but afterwards I will ask Richard Pensker to make some comments if he wishes, if I've missed anything, and we're more than happy to answer any questions. 3 quick remarks though. Firstly, I think we all know this has been an extremely difficult year, and setting this budget's been quite tricky. There's a lot of uncertainty in doing that. The pandemic will end, and we need to recover, and hopefully we're working towards a budget that will aid that. So we've tried to strike a balance between the need to deliver and support our communities through that recovery, strong financial control, of course, because we need to by law balance the budget, and to reflect the priorities of the council. We're being open, fair and green. Secondly, the usual story. Every year the demand for our services increases, as does the cost of providing those services, above our ability to raise income, both from things like car parking fees and leisure centres, and mainly obviously council tax and business rates. So the first step we've done is to look at savings, and this plan includes £7.5 million worth of savings, which are actual savings and transformations and not cuts. So that's really good news. But still, the position is very unclear. So those of you who read the report will see that the initial proposal is to adopt the 3% increase for the adult social care precept, as well as to levy the 1.99% in the base council tax. We start from a low tax base anyway, and I think this is possibly in line with the vast majority of councils across the UK, whatever colour or mixture of colours they are. And it reflects very much the situation we're kind of in. But finally, I'd like to say what it does do, and what we're working towards, is having over £1 million that are to do with kind of one-off investment proposals that will help us kind of see our way out of the pandemic, and help us recover. And they are kind of fun. There's details in the report of where our thinking is going on there, and they include additional funds for children's services, help to tackle the climate change and ecological emergencies following on from Councillor Petty's report, support for business, investments in highways and sustainable travel, and of course support for vulnerable adults. So in conclusion, I'll perhaps ask Richard Pensker to come in if he wants to say anything shortly, but my ask is that members note the recommendations, these updated projections, the next steps as outlined in the reports, and perhaps any alternatives that we may discuss shortly. Thank you. Is Mr. Pensker available? Does he want to add anything?
Thanks, Councillor Cartman. Just a very short comment, because you've covered most things. Just to re-emphasise the fact that it's very much a one-year settlement and a one-year budget, and it's very difficult for us to project 22-23 onwards, which is why the administration's investment plans are, as Councillor Cartman stated, one-off. There's certainly not a view that that we could fund them going forward without knowing where we are with a three-year settlement. Let's hope for 22-23 onwards. So that was just the point I wanted to emphasise. Thank you.
Chairman, Councillor Ashton would like to speak.
Right.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, firstly, just one short comment. That every year has been tricky. You'll never have enough money to do what you really think you ought to do. So I'm delighted to hear you say that it's been tricky, but to be honest, it's been tricky for the last 12 years, trust me. And whilst we welcome the extra millions that we've received during the year and since December, mostly for sorry, the phone was going. Mostly for direct costs of COVID and reduction of income and additional costs and support to most vulnerable and companies and individuals. I understand that's right and proper. Hopefully that will continue. But we have received millions in unring-fenced funding. And although I understand the caution over what still lies ahead and the uncertainty, and there's never enough money, as we said, even this crisis distract totally from some of the other issues which have always been ongoing problems and will clearly seem mundane in comparison to COVID or climate. But some things you can choose not to do, others you are merely postponing the inevitable. And one obvious example is roads, highways and footpaths. And certainly around here, and I suspect everywhere, there's a marked deterioration already through potholes, flooding, blocked drains, path disintegration, paths being used even more lately, because they're unable to be dealt with in a timely fashion. I understand that, but you will only postpone doing these. They will become worse, they will become bigger, and they'll become far more expensive, and they will be dangerous. We have areas of flooding now not being cleared away because of blocked drains. And as the chairman mentioned recently, where grass is allowed to grow and blocks drains and things like that, it becomes even more dangerous and more expensive. And to be honest, the picture shown in the petition, which was a bit strange, I thought it was in remarkably good condition compared to some of the well-used rural roads and pathways we have up here around where I am. And it is something that I think you are going to have to put more funding into, because as I say, it will become dangerous, it will become deteriorated, especially on the coast path and things like that, and you will have to do it. And looking at the funding that I've seen in the most recent papers, there isn't enough money to keep up with even with inflation, let alone the increasing demand, whilst you have to tackle, I understand, the more important frontline issues.
Yeah,
I suppose the question is, can you relook at what you've put into that?
Yeah, I think on that, Councillor Ashton, thank you for your comments, and you know, I reiterate, I appreciate it has been difficult for a number of years, and it will probably continue to be. We are at the moment still looking at, I think, talking about highways, going through and trying to assess what the additional investment we will need to make on top of those pothole funds, etc., that we receive from central government to maintain the so-called steady state. And I know that's the approach that Councillor Ashton, I believe, adopted when he was leader, and I think that's the right approach to make at the moment, so that we maintain to a minimum quality our highway network. I think that's absolutely imperative, but that work is underway, and I would hope that I will have another look at that for him. It's absolutely right. In terms of the other kind of more, what I'd say, perhaps non-highways issues, where he talks about in footpaths and maybe what I'd call green and other infrastructure, he will notice there is a reference to that in the report. And again, it's probably not tight at the moment because we are still looking at it. So I'd appreciate any kind of comments he's got on that. I think we've all seen the pressure on footpaths and the like in our outdoor space as a consequence of the pandemic. And I think that possibly may be a permanent change. And we want to invest in that now, because like I say, that's probably more cost effective than leaving it too long. And we're currently looking at what we can do on that. But again, I'd be more than happy to take any feedback on the benefit of his experience on that, if he feels that's appropriate.
Thank you. Happy to do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Bridger, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief point now, rather than perhaps making it next month with my scrutiny hat on. So I know in the report that the plan is to make £7.5 million worth of savings from transformational related activity. So I think there are a lot of potential opportunities there, but that is a lot of money. I know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but I think the nature of that work, I think, calls for probably special scrutiny as those transformational programs work their way through the rest of this year and probably beyond. So I'm thinking in particular the assets and accommodation review that's taking place, but there are at least half a dozen other really major transformation streams, I think, and there's a lot of complexity there, and I think a lot of that will possibly feel a little bit opaque for any residents who might be tuning in or reading some of the reports. So as I say, I think we'll need to have sort of continual oversight of that work, obviously in a way that's proportionate and where members can add value, but be reassured really that we're sort of delivering on the intended outcomes of those transformation programs, that we're taking a strategic joined up approach, how we're developing partnerships and obviously mindful of how the climate and nature emergency is embedded into the budget and transformation programs, as well as Councillor Petty was saying when speaking to the previous item. So there's a lot hidden behind that £7.5 million saving, I think. So I think that's also in line with my bit of a hobby horse of mine, really, which is to get scrutiny to take more of a forward view of things rather than always looking at the rear view mirror. So I think that's something that I feel is important to me, and I think a lot of other panel members are very mindful of that. But I think I'll stop there.
Okay, I'll come back quickly on that, Steve, that's all right. So yes, I mean, by all means, we'll share the detail for the scrutiny. I know that Coco was involved with looking at some of the initial proposals, and I think you'll note in the report there was about 300 or 350,000 that wasn't taken up, and that was partly in response to the scrutiny and also feedback from other members. So that's good. I take your point about it's a lot to deliver. There is additional one-off resource in there to actually fund officers and time and people to help deliver those programs, because they're key. So that's quite a heavy commitment that the officer group asked for if they wanted to have, for us to have any certainty that 7.5 could be delivered, and that's about 480,000, I think, to do that. But we will need to keep it under review.
Thanks, Ash.
Councillor Gibbons, Chairman.
So thank you. Yes, I just wanted to sort of thank Councillor Cartman for this, and just to reiterate how difficult things are. And as Councillor Ashton said, they've been difficult for a long time. I mean, the Local Government Association recently published a report which highlights the funding that has declined to local government over the past 10 years or so, and they estimate that councils in England will face a funding gap of more than £5 billion by 2024 just to maintain services at current levels. So basically the government's going to need to provide an additional 10.1 billion per year in core funding to local government in England in order to plug the existing funding gap. So I think it's a testament to our staff and our services that we have managed as well as we do manage in that climate and in this context. So yeah, we are going to have to, we do make difficult decisions on a daily basis, and our colleagues in previous administration have done so. I don't have the answers, but it is a very, very difficult world we've existed in for a long time, and we have the pandemic, which is certainly not making things any easier. So for residents listening, I'm just setting a little context.
Yes, no, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. It's been difficult, and it will undoubtedly be difficult. And if it wasn't for the efforts of the excellent officers and the finance team and across all directors, would have been a lot worse. I think you're right. I think it hasn't been helped. The pandemic's thrown off course any kind of review of adult social care funding, which is desperately needed for local government, as well as the fair funding review. And of course, we're still on one-year settlements, which is, I mean, they've all been delayed because of COVID, essentially. So we look forward to getting them sorted over the next year.
Councillor Crewe, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on that point, it occurs to me that I've no real objection to anything in what's proposed there, Councillor Cartman. What I think we need to do, sometimes we tend to miss where we could make some savings. And I thought back earlier when I was looking at this, the time when we had the government brought in best value, and we had working groups looking at best value. I'm wondering whether if you look at the money we need for potholes, £1 million can go a long way. I just wondered if it would be useful for something for the Audit Committee over the next 12 months to look at the way we spend our money in terms of buying stationery, all the small things that normally you would think wouldn't save much money. But I can recall an investigation that I was involved with on best value. We actually saved the council £1.5 million in the end, by looking at various ways of doing different things. And that was at the lower end that you wouldn't normally look at. You'd normally look at the big spends. And suddenly, £1 million can go a long way to potholes. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Davies, Chairman.
Hi, thank you. mean, first of all, I'd like to thank the officers for the work they've been doing, not only to deliver this budget, but actually in making sure that we're able to provide the services we have to and those we want to over very many years under the straitened circumstances that Councillor Ashton most graphically described. So I think we need to be thankful when we're looking at these figures. It isn't just us. This is down to our officers to delivering this for us and for the residents of North Somerset. But Councillor Ashton makes a very good point in a slightly indirect way around footpaths. I regularly use the footpaths in North Somerset, and I would say that our officers, both in parish and at North Somerset Council, have done a marvellous job in making them far more accessible. But I note the point that Councillor Ashton makes about the coastal path and in his ward, which is in quite a shocking state of repair. If we are going to encourage that visitor economy into North Somerset as the pandemic recedes and we're able to get more visitors and tourists in, that's the kind of thing that we on the ground as councillors need to be feeding back into officers both at parish and at district council level about where there are problems on the footpath network, because it's quite amazing how many people are out walking now, and I'm sure from the people I've spoken to will continue to do so post-pandemic because they find it so enjoyable doing so, and that's the kind of thing we as members need to engage upon to make sure that network is fit for purpose. Thank you.
Councillor Westwood, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on something Councillor Crew has said there as far as finding work for the Audit Committee to do, I would point out that under the previous administration, there was an Audit Committee. It met 3 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year for about 2 hours each time. That's all that it did, and signed off the audit reports. This Audit Committee, present Audit Committee, is very much active, and we are looking at a number of things, and we will be looking to see how we can save the council money on a local basis. But we are and have been, as Councillor Ashton pointed out, under straitened circumstances and basically under the control of a government. I'm one of the reps as far as the police and crime panel is concerned. This year, in similar to the previous 2 years, we are being recommended that we can have a £15 bandy equivalent increase without having a local referendum. That's what the Home Secretary has said. As a police and crime panel, we're allowed to do as far as the budget is concerned. Now, this means that basically that 15 quid is something which is in there, but which we are expected to find locally. So if we don't charge that extra 15 quid, we will suffer cuts, basically. That's the truth of it. So, like I said, when we think about the straitened circumstances, we really should remember where they're coming from. Thank you.
Chairman, no other speakers.
Right. Thank you very much. I've no doubt we will go through much of this at the next meeting when the budget is presented. But in the meantime, I will thank you all for your time, patience and understanding, and declare the meeting closed.
Chairman,
thank you.
Chairman, you just do need to take a vote on that item.
Shall I propose the item?
I think you're only noting it, Ash, but yes, if you could please.
And I'll second it then.
Yeah.
Anybody against? Any abstentions? It's carried. Thank you, Ash.
Lovely.
Thank you all members. Mike Rigord, the YouTube stream can now be cut, and that's the meeting over. Many thanks for your attention and presence.